This is the Apraio dashboard. It's a place for you to manage and organise all of your projects. Each one of these is a project, and as you can see, we've got the site address, a development summary, and 3 key metrics, which is automatically pulled from the financial appraisal. The dashboard is organised into 3 lists, or as we call them, statuses, and you can change the name of these statuses by clicking onto the name at the top and choosing names that suit your business. When you click into a project, I'll take this one here, 151 Wardour Street as an example, you can see a few bits of information. Firstly, the project address, which you can click to edit. Secondly, the status, which at the moment is in legals. We can then see a project summary, which is an opportunity for you to type any information around the project into this section. And then finally at the bottom we have the appraisals themselves. So here you can see there's 3 appraisals for this project, an initial appraisal, one that was with the potential planning and one that's with the existing planning. We can always set which is the primary appraisal by using this menu here, and that will determine the metrics which appear on the dashboard. You can then also click in to edit that appraisal, or what we can do is we can copy that appraisal if we want to run a version of the numbers on that project. But for now, I'm going to return back to the dashboard and change the status of this project to a live project. So I make that change here, I return to the dashboard, and now we can see that 151 Wardour Street has become a live project. To create a new project, simply click on Create Project. You're then asked to enter a few bits of information. So the first is the site address. I'm going to make up a site address and we're going to call it 1 London Road in Cobham. Next, we can choose the site address. So whether that's under review, in legals, or live projects, these actually come from the names of the statuses which you set on your dashboard. So this is under review, and then we can enter a project summary. So I've just got one here that's for the demolition of an existing building and the construction of 6 5-bedroom houses. Literally click create, and now we have a project. Within this screen, we can see and change the project address, the status, and that summary. And then from here, we can create our first appraisal. We click the add new button, and we can give that appraisal a name. So let's, for example, call this one the initial appraisal, and I'm going to put the same summary in this case. I press create, and now we are into the appraisal editor. So we've successfully created our first appraisal for this project. The next thing for us to do is get this appraisal set up how we want to. Now you can change the title and the summary at any time, and also you can set the residual site value. Now this is particularly important if you're in a land team or you're looking at making site acquisitions, to make sure that you're not paying too much for the site. So in this case, we're going to set our target return at 25% of cost. And as we complete this appraisal, we're going to see what we should be paying for the site down here. Now we're going to add some sales information into the appraisal. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the sales tab here, and now we've got the chance of entering either a residential or commercial unit type. A unit type is a single unit or a group of units which are of a similar type. So this site was for 6 5-bedroom houses. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a residential unit type. The first thing that we'll do is we'll give it a description, so 5-bedroom houses, and then we click add units. This is where we enter the number of units, which in this case is 6, the description, the area per unit, let's just say they're 2,500 square foot per unit, and the value per unit. So in this case, let's say £850,000 per unit. We press that button, and now we've got a quick list of all of our units. Now, it's unlikely that you're going to have 6 units of exactly the same square foot. So this is a tool to quickly add the units, which is ideal if you're doing a very fast appraisal. Or what you can then do is go in and actually customize the area. So we might call this one might have an extra 250 square feet, for example. And as I've typed that 2,750 in, you can see that the pounds per square foot has automatically updated. Alternatively, I can actually change the pounds per square foot, and you can see that the value updates, or I can update the value. So let's say that this one is £1 million, and then the pounds per square foot updates in reverse. You can also customize the name of the unit. As we scroll down, we've got deposits. So here we can see we have 10% deposits, or you can also set an amount per unit. This allows you to break out the deposits in the cash flow. At the bottom, we have the associated costs. So these are sales agents and sales legals, which can be changed by either changing the percentage or the amount of money in pounds. And we can also add custom costs by clicking this. We can give it a custom name and set the cost either as a percentage of GDV or putting an amount in pounds. At the bottom then, we have the total fees associated with those unit sales and then the net revenue from that. Once we've done that, we can collapse this and we can see the total saleable area, the NIA here, the gross development value here, the total sales cost and the net development value there. We can then continue to add different unit types if our development has multiple unit types, and also commercial unit types from here. To add build costs into the appraisal, we click on build. In this section here, we've got the opportunity of adding our main build cost in this section and prelims. So the preliminary costs are things pre-construction or that sit outside of the main construction of the building. Here what we can do is we can enter the cost name and enter an amount, and we can also set up templates, so these are the same on every project that you're looking at. You can always add more preliminary costs by clicking that button there, customizing the name and setting the amount, and we can also remove costs. The next step is the main build phase, and you can have as many of the build phases in the appraisal as you want. Because this is a simple site for 6 houses, what we're going to do is we're just going to call this phase residential build costs. Here you can see the area which has automatically been pulled from the sales section, and this shows us the NIA, which if we want to, we can bring into the appraisal by clicking the apply button. So now we can see the NIA is 15,250 square feet, and by default in this one we had 120% gross to net ratio. So what that means is actually if you were building flats, for example, you're building a larger area than you're selling. But with houses, that's not normally the case. You're building and selling the same square footage. So what we're going to do is we're going to set that to 100, and then you can see the gross and the net are the same. The reason this is important is because the construction cost is driven off of the gross area. So now what we can do is either a full itemized build cost breakdown, which we can do by adding in build costs from here, or we can do a very straightforward one-line build cost, which is ideal if you're doing a quick appraisal. So here we've got the residential build costs, and let's make an assumption of £180 per square foot, which you can see has now given us our 2.745 million construction cost to build these 6 houses. Down here we've got a contingency which we can set either by a percentage or an amount of money, and that's a percentage of the build cost of this phase. At the bottom then you can see the total construction cost including the contingency. Should you want to create a new phase, simply hit this button here and we can start building another phase in exactly the same way. Once complete, you can always see a summary of all of your total build costs, including and excluding contingency at the bottom of the page. This section is a place for you to input any other costs on the project. So things like professional fees, marketing costs, planning fees can all be entered here. There's no limit to the number of costs that you can add to this section, and you can easily add costs with this button here, give them a name. You can then either set the cost as a percentage of the build cost or by entering the whole amount. You can also remove costs easily, and we help you by setting up templates if you're always working from the same cost assumptions. As usual, at the bottom we've got a summary showing the total other costs in the appraisal. Hopefully by now you can also see that the summary box on the right is starting to take shape, and we're starting to get a residual site purchase budget. Add a site purchase element or the site into the appraisal, what we're going to do is click on the site purchase tab. Next, we're going to click Add Purchase Element. Now we call it a purchase element because this can be anything from an existing building to a piece of land, or even a rights of light payment or ransom strip. So in this case, we'll call it the purchase of the existing building. You give the description here. Then you set the current use class. So this is not a residential existing use class. We set the legal fees on the purchase and the agent's fees if there are any. Next, what we can do is one of two things. If you already know the purchase price, we can input that information in here. So let's say you're paying £800,000 for this site. We can enter that information, and then stamp duty is automatically calculated based on that current use class. You can also override that stamp duty with the custom stamp duty switch by doing this. And then what we will do is we will indicate the profit and the return on cost over here on the right hand side, taking into account your purchase price. Now, if you're using Aprao to calculate the residual site value, you may recall that we set the target return as 25% down here. So what we've done here is explained that the residual site purchase budget, in order to achieve your 25% return on cost, or GDV if you choose this option, means that you can afford to spend £796,000.75 on the site acquisition. That is a gross purchase budget. When I come back over to this section here, you can see that we then work backwards through these legal fees, agents fees and stamp duty and arrive at a net residual value here of £755,000. So this is a very useful tool if you want to work out how much you should be paying for a site. So what you can do is look at that number, use this button and bring that straight into the appraisal. And now, as you can see over on the right hand side, the summary is now showing a 25% return on cost, which was our target down here. You can add as many purchase elements into the appraisal as you want, and if you've got similar purchase elements, let's say multiple apartments in a building which you're buying separately, we can click duplicate and it will create similar purchase elements very easily. Now let's add some finance into the appraisal. So as you can see here, we start with no finance in the mix. At the bottom, we can see that the developer is contributing 100% of total development costs, which in this case is 4.124. The total borrowing is 0 and the total development costs are here. What we can do is we can add our first lender using this button. So let's just call this senior debt for now. You can give it any name you want. That could be the name of your bank or your investor. We can either set the bank's facility or the borrowing as an amount in pounds, a percentage of total costs, or a percentage of gross development value. So let's just say 50% of gross development value is the size of our borrowing. We then set our estimated facility term, which we're going to guess at 18 months at the moment for this project. We then can set fees. These are completely customizable. You can change the names or remove them if you don't need them. And in this case, let's say we're doing 1% of the facility is the commitment fee, and you've got an exit fee of 1% of the facility from your lender. Next, we choose the interest type, and we've got 3 interest types. So interest on drawn balances, and that's typical across most senior debt on development projects. Then you can select interest on the full loan amount, typical with something like mezzanine finance, which is going to be lent to you in its entirety at the beginning of the project. And then finally, a profit share, which when I click, you then have the opportunity to select the share of the profit. For now, we're going to stick with interest on drawn balances. We then set our interest rate, let's say 5%, and we can choose whether that is per annum or per month, and choose whether the interest is retained or not. Down here, we then estimate the interest based on a construction S-curve, typical S-curve throughout the life of the project, and then indicate the total facility, including the interest roll-up. If you don't want the interest to be rolled up, you can flick this switch and then you can see that the facility size remains at 50% of GDV. At the bottom here, we've got the fees associated with that lender and the estimated total cost. So that's the interest and fees associated with that lender. So this is a really good way to understand how much that lender is likely to cost you to borrow from. If I then minimize this section, we can now see at the bottom that the developer is putting in £1.5 million, the lender is putting in £2.7 million, and that shows the breakdown of funding. What we can then do is add another lender into the mix. So for example, we might want to add a mezzanine lender in here, which we can set the name as I showed you before. We can set the amount, let's just say it is £550,000 that they'll be lending. Again, we'll do that over 18 months. Let's say there's a 1% commitment fee and no exit fee in this case, and it might be on the full loan amount and an interest rate of 1% per month, with interest paid at the end of the project. So I've gone through that very quickly, but you can see that we're borrowing £550,000 on the mezzanine. The total fees are £5,500, and the cost of that is going to be £104,500. When I collapse that, we can now see that the equity going in is 1.106, and now only 25% of the project's total costs. Now let's create the cash flow. To create the cash flow, what we do is we start by choosing the start month. So let's just say it's going to be April 2020. The next thing I like to start with would be the site purchase. So let's say in month 1 of the cash flow, we're going to pay a 10% deposit to acquire the site. So we enter the month that will come in and the percentage of the purchase price, which we can apply with that plus button. Then 2 months later, in month 3, we're going to pay the balance on the site. So we can do that, and now you can see that the cash flow is starting to show. So month 1 is our 10% down, month 3 is the 90% balance on the site acquisition. Next, we've got stamp duty, legals and agents, which we can set. In this case, let's do it at the point where the site completes. So we're going to apply that at month 3, and at 100% of the payment will be made in that month. So we've now allocated our site purchase. You can see that the costs, when they've not been allocated, are orange, and once a cost has been allocated, it turns white. So that is a really good risk indicator to make sure that you've not unallocated certain costs. So here what we can do with the prelims, let's say we're going to start the prelims from month 4 once we've completed on the site, and they're going to run for 6 months. So we can choose to spread those preliminary costs either straight or as an S-curve. For prelims, I'm going to go with straight for now. So basically we're going to have those costs over the first few months of the project. But from month 6, we're actually going to start construction. So month 6, what we're going to do then is we're going to run that for 12 months. So again, I've got the same choice of either a straight spread or an S-curve. And when I spread it as an S-curve, you can now see that those costs are allocated over the life of the project in a more of a natural flow of construction costs, where through the middle part of the project, you've got the most amount of cost. Next up is our other costs. So with these, you can either click into the appraisal or the cash flow and type them manually. So for example, we might be paying £50,000 up front for the architect, and in month 5 we're going to pay the balance, which will be £61,700. Or with other costs, you might choose to spread them. So an engineer, let's just say we're going to start paying them on month 1 and we're going to pay them over 6 months. The planning fees, we might want to pay them over the first 3 months of the project. QS, we're actually going to run for the full length of the project. So we start him on month 1 and run it for 18 months. And then on the building warranty, we might only pay that later on. So let's go for month 14 and put in the building warranty in here. So we can either type it in, as I showed you, or we can use this tool here. For the senior debt and the bank fees, we're going to have the commitment fee on month 1, because that's probably when we're going to start borrowing their money, and the mezzanine fee as well. Now we'll come back to the exit fee shortly, because we need to know when the lender's going to be repaid to understand where that fee comes into the mix. When it comes to sales, what we're going to do is look at when the construction finishes. So the construction here finishes in month 17. So let's start looking at selling in month 18. but we're expected to start receiving deposits from a few months earlier. So let's say in month 15, we expect to receive 1 deposit per month, so reservation deposits or exchange monies on the site. And then what we're going to do is actually 2 months later start receiving the balances. So in month 17, again, we're going to have 1 unit per month completing. If you don't want to do it on a number of units per month, you can also set the sales phase. So you might say we are going to allow 6 months to sell all of the units, and Aprao will then distribute the sales over that period of time. So now what we have is a full cash flow forecast created in under 2 minutes. We can see up here the project IRR, the equity IRR, and you also have the ability of exporting the cash flow to Excel here. Now that we've inputted all of the information, we can export a report. This can either be viewed online, you can export it as a PDF, or you can share it by link with people. So let's have a quick look at this report. You don't need to do anything to this. It's all automatically formatted and all of the information is populated from your inputs earlier on in the appraisal process. So to kick things off, we've got the site address and the appraisal description at the top with the date that it was created. We then have a Google map of the site, which is automatically populated from the site address, the development summary, which we inputted on the appraisal page. And then we've got a 1-page summary financial appraisal. So this shows you all of your key metrics and data points all on 1 page. So as you can see at the bottom here, we have the project IRR, the return on equity, return on cost, and return on GDV, also the profit figure. We then break this down into sections. So we then go into a lot more detail. So we've got the sales breakdown. So here we can see the number of units, the square footage, the pounds per square foot, the values, etc. With the full list and schedule of accommodation. We then also have the site purchase information, the build cost information, other costs, finance section, showing the breakdown of equity in from the developer, as well as all of the lenders in the debt stack. And then finally, we also have a sensitivity analysis. And this sensitivity analysis is very useful because it looks at what happens in different scenarios. So here we can see what happens if the GDV, the gross development value, drops by 5 or 10, 15 or 20%, or goes up. And what would happen with that scenario against the build cost either going up or down. So, for example, our base case scenario is here in the middle. If the GDV dropped by 10% and our build cost went up by 10%, we'd actually be making a -1% return on cost. So you want to see as much green as possible here, but this is a really great tool for understanding the risk profile of your project. I'm going to scroll back to the top, and what I'm going to do is show you how to export this as a PDF. To do that, what we do is we click on the print report button. From here, this opens a print dialog, and what you want to do is make sure that the background graphics are ticked and headers and footers is unticked. Now you can see from this preview that the pages are perfectly formatted on a page-by-page basis, ready for saving as a PDF. You'll need to choose Save as PDF from your print dialog over on the right, hit Save, and that will save this as a PDF to your dashboard or your downloads for you to save and share with whoever you want to. The final way of sharing this is by link. So I return back to the project page here. Next to an appraisal, I can click the menu and click Share. When I do this, I can turn on link-based sharing, which puts you in control of who you are allowing to see your appraisal. I'm going to copy that link and I can send that by email or by chat, however you want, to whoever you want. So that's ideal for sharing projects both internally and externally within your business. When the person receiving that opens it, they will see the following. They will see a summary, a web-based summary of that appraisal. They can't touch it, they can't edit it, but they can view it. They can also save it as a PDF. And if they are an Aprao customer, they will also have the opportunity to click this button and save that appraisal to their dashboard to edit a copy. But don't worry, it won't change your original appraisal.